Okay, this is for Algebra 1, and this is more than meets the eye. And we're talking about transformations to the quadratic parent function. First of all, you've got to remember what is the quadratic parent function, and that is y equal x squared. Transformations on the quadratic parent function that we've talked about so far involve 5 words. We've talked about flipping it. We've talked about it getting wide. We've talked about it getting narrow. We've talked about it going up, and we've talked about it going down. We're still focusing on the same transformations, but now that we understand them, when you get ready for end of course, they're going to try to figure out a way to make this more difficult, and the way they do that is they change the words. So you need to know what you can do to the equation to cause a flip. Remember, we're starting with the parent function. To make it flip, you put a negative in front of x squared. We've already talked about this. To make it wider, you put a smaller number in front of x squared. To make it narrower, you're going to put a bigger number in front of x squared. To make it move up, you're going to have a bigger number at the end. This is where your constant is. It's not always at the end, it usually is. But if your constant gets bigger, it's going to move up. So a smaller number for your constant, which is usually at the end, is going to make it move down. That's what we've talked about. That's how you change the equation to make this happen. Opens downward. Stop and think about it. New way of wording it. But what have we actually done to the graph if it opens down instead of up? We flipped it. So if it tells you it opens downward, you need a negative in front of your x squared. If you see the words shifted up, this is the same thing as if you moved something up. And so the way we would cause that to happen on our equation is we would have a bigger number for your constant. Remember, your constant is usually at the end of the equation. Shifted down would be like a move down, and so we need a smaller number for the constant, which is usually at the end. Remember, the constant does not have a letter with it. Vertically compressed. We have not seen this word. Vertically compressed is if you take it and you push it together from the top and the bottom. So the sides are going to have to squeeze out, and that's going to make it wider. So vertically compressed means the same thing as wider, which means that you need a smaller number with x squared. Vertically stretched is when you take it and you just pull it up and down. And when you stretch it, it's going to get really tall and skinny or narrow. So that means that we need a bigger number in front of x squared. So vertically stretched is like getting narrow. Reflex across the x-axis is the same thing as a flip. And the way you do that is you have a negative in front of x squared. Opens upward is like your original parent function, so there is no change. You've got to have a positive x squared. Okay, so write an equation that flips and moves up 2. So it's going to start y equal. Flip means there's a negative in front of your x squared. Moves up 2 means add 2 at the end. So negative x squared plus 2. Write an equation that moves up 4 and gets wider. So this is going to be plus 4 at the end. And if it's going to get wider, you're going to have a small number with x squared. So y is equal to 1/2 x squared plus 4. It could have been 2/3 x squared, 7/8 x squared, anything that's smaller than 1. Write an equation that opens downward and is wide. To open down, you've got to have a negative in front of your x squared, and to y, you've got to have a small number in front of x squared. So y is equal to negative 3/4 x squared. Write an equation that is shifted down. You're going to subtract a number at the end. So y is equal to x squared minus 3. If it is vertically compressed, that means it's going to be wide, which means a small number with x squared. Y is equal to 2/3 x squared. Write an equation that is vertically stretched. That's the same thing as getting narrow, which means that you need a big number with x squared. Y is equal to 4x squared. Write an equation that reflects across the x-axis. That's the same thing as a flip, which means you need a negative. Y is equal to negative x squared. Okay, that was more than meets the eye. If you have any questions, come see me during speed.